They don't see the ice, but I hear it weep. Elder Igor, blind since birth, felt the vibration in the frozen ground, a premonition that chilled the soul more than the biting 70-degree-seat wind. A deep growl tore through the thin air, not from one, but from hundreds of wild throats. The horde of nearly 1,000 Siberian tigers, a nightmare vision of white and stripes, advanced, not seeking prey, but vengeance. With his keen ears, Igor distinguished desperate wails, not from hunters, but from cubs trapped in an ice cave on the verge of collapse. His heart, older than the glaciers, knew that the survival of his village, perhaps of the entire tundra, depended on an act of insane altruism, and on what he, blind, would do against the fury of 1,000 predators. Igor remained motionless for an instant that seemed eternal. The wrinkled skin of his face contracted, not by the biting 70-degree-C cold, but by the gravity of the vision his other senses brought him. The roars of the 1,000 Siberian tigers, once a sound of distant threat, now resonated like a war drum around the village, each vibration in the frozen ground confirming the horde's proximity. The village, a cluster of tents and fur shelters, was paralyzed, the faces of elders and young alike reflecting the same icy terror as the tundra. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, while the hunters, with their bows and spears, knew that 1,000 hungry predators were an insurmountable force. Anya, a young woman with bright eyes and a brave heart, now clouded by fear, approached Igor. Her breath formed small clouds in the air, and her hands trembled slightly as she touched the elder's shoulder. "Igor, what will we do? They are everywhere. If we go out, we will be prey. If we stay, they will destroy us for their cubs." Her voice, usually firm, was choked with anguish, and her large dark eyes, fixed on Igor's serene face, pleaded for an answer that would bring some hope. Igor turned slowly towards Anya, his blind face, marked by the elements and the wisdom of countless winters, conveying a calm that seemed impossible at that moment. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "We will not go out to hunt, Anya. We will go out to free them." He paused, and the sound of ice cracking in the distance, a sharp, fragile lament, seemed to intensify only for him. "I hear the cubs. They are afraid, and the cave, it is weeping, about to give way. If we do not act, nature will do the tigers' work for us, and their fury will be even greater." The other villagers, who had approached to listen, exchanged glances of disbelief and despair. Rescue tiger cubs? Enter an unstable ice cave? It was madness, a senseless sacrifice. But Igor did not see madness. He felt justice and necessity. His thin, experienced fingers fumbled in the air, seeking the twisted wooden staff that always accompanied him. His ears caught not only the threatening roars of the horde, but also the delicate symphony of the ice, each crack, each murmur painting a precise map in his mind. Anya, with tears streaming down her frozen face, tried to argue again, but Igor was already moving, his steps slow and firm, guided by an unwavering determination. He did not need to see the danger to feel it, and his blindness, paradoxically, was his greatest strength. The villagers watched, their hearts divided between paralyzing fear and a spark of admiration for the elder's courage. Some began to pray in silence. Others gripped their weapons, ready for whatever came, even if they knew it was a lost battle. Igor stopped at the village entrance, the icy wind whipping his fur garments. He raised his head as if observing the horizon, and his senses extended beyond visible barriers. He heard the cave ice, a chorus of agony, and the faint whimpers of the cubs, a desperate call that pierced the heart of the beast and his own. With an almost inaudible sigh, he took the first step out of the village's refuge, entering the white vastness and the fury of 1,000 eyes watching him in the icy darkness. Igor took the first step, and the silence that followed was heavier than the icy air itself. It was not a silence of peace, but of tense anticipation, like the moment before an avalanche. The roars of the tiger horde, which had previously seemed a distant chorus, were now deep, restrained whispers, a promise of imminent fury. Each of the nearly 1,000 predators, with their amber eyes fixed on the elder's fragile figure, seemed to hold their breath, observing every movement, every vibration on the ground. The snow beneath Igor's feet crunched softly, a sound that to his keen ears was as loud as thunder. He felt the biting cold on his skin, but his mind was elsewhere, attuned to the trembling melody of the crumbling ice. Anya watched from the village entrance, her hands covering her mouth to stifle a sob. Her eyes, brimming with tears that froze on her eyelids, followed Igor's silhouette as it receded into the white vastness. She felt a knot in her throat, a mixture of dread and almost painful admiration. How could a blind man, so advanced in age, possess such courage? It was as if he saw the world in a way no one else could, a vision beyond sight. The other villagers, motionless as ice statues, shared the same feeling of helplessness and awe, aware of Igor's sacrifice for an uncertain future of peace with the beasts, a peace that seemed impossible in that moment of despair. For Igor, the world was a tapestry of sounds and sensations. The howling wind carried the wild scent of the tigers, a constant reminder of the threat. The ground beneath his feet told stories of fissures and instabilities, each change in the texture of snow or ice, a detailed map. He heard the beat of his own heart, calm and steady, and the accelerated beats of the cubs in the cave, an echo of his own fears. The melody of cracking ice grew clearer, more urgent with each step, a lament that promised collapse. It was a sound others would ignore, but for Igor, it was the voice of nature itself. A silent cry, pleading for help. The mother tigress, a majestic female with dark stripes and piercing eyes, was at the forefront of the horde, her posture tense and vigilant. Her roars, once furious, were now low moans of anguish directed towards the cave. She watched Igor with an intensity that seemed to want to pierce his soul. There was no longer the blind aggression from before, but a predatory caution mixed with maternal pain. She did not attack, not because she feared him, but because her instincts told her that this man, strangely, was heading towards her cubs. It was a silent truce, forged by the urgency of the situation and the elder's inexplicable bravery. Igor continued, his staff probing the way ahead, an extension of his senses. Each step was deliberate. The ice cave, a dark mouth on the mountain face, seemed to swallow the faint daylight. The air around it was colder, saturated with the humidity of melting ice. The cubs' whimpers became more distinct, small echoes of despair. Igor felt the vibration of the ice beneath his feet intensify, a constant tremor announcing collapse. The cave was not just weeping, it was groaning, about to crumble. Time was an enemy as relentless as the cold or the tiger's fury. He needed to be quick, yet precise, relying blindly on his hearing to guide him. The next step would take him into the icy darkness. Igor extended his staff forward, feeling the sharp, irregular edge of the cave entrance. The air inside was dense, laden with the damp smell of ice and a faint but perceptible echo of the cub's whimpers. He took the decisive step, and the darkness that for others would be absolute, for him was merely an absence of light, not of information. His ears were his eyes, and the ice, a vibrant canvas of sounds. Every tiny crack, every deep murmur of the cave drew a precise three-dimensional map in his mind. He felt the texture of the ground beneath his reindeer hide boots, the unevenness of the slippery ice, the small, loose stones that could make him slip at any moment. The cold was more intense inside, an icy embrace that seemed to penetrate to his bones, but his determination was a fire that kept him warm. Outside, Anya wrapped her arms around herself, her eyes fixed on the dark mouth of the cave that had swallowed Igor. Time seemed to have stopped, stretched into a painful eternity. The roars of the 1,000 tigers had almost completely ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. The mother tigress, still at the forefront of the horde, was crouched, her tail nervously whipping the snow, creating small white ripples. Her eyes, once full of fury, now reflected a palpable anxiety, a mixture of fear and hope. She did not attack, but her stillness was more threatening than any roar, a suspended promise of violence should Igor fail. The villagers in their tents and shelters waited, their hearts beating in unison with the fear and hope that wrestled within each of them. Inside the cave, Igor advanced with calculated slowness, each movement deliberate. The sound of the cubs was closer now, a faint but persistent chorus of despair that broke the elder's heart. He could feel the vibration of the ice beneath his feet, a constant tremor that intensified with each meter of progress. It was as if the cave were alive, breathing and groaning in its own agony. He extended a wrinkled hand, feeling the damp, cold ice wall, sensing the deep fissures, the open veins of a structure about to give way. The trembling melody of cracking ice was now a symphony of imminent destruction, each note a clear and urgent warning of danger. He needed to find the cubs before the concert reached its final climax. A louder sound, a dry, thunderous crack that made the ground tremble, echoed through the cave, causing small fragments of ice and snow to fall from the ceiling, tinkling on the floor. Igor stopped, his body tense, listening with all his concentration. The sound came from a deep, dark crevice to his right, an icy abyss. The cub's whimpers increased in intensity, clearly coming from the same direction. He turned, staff forward, and began to move towards the crevice, feeling the instability of the ground beneath his feet increase dramatically. Each step was an act of unwavering faith, a gamble against the relentless nature of Yakutia. He could not see the danger with his eyes, but he felt it in every fiber of his being, a silent, deadly dance with the ice that threatened to swallow him. Anya, outside, heard the muffled rumble coming from the cave, a sound that made her own heart leap in her chest. A choked cry escaped her lips, and she ran a few steps towards the entrance, as if wanting to go in and help, but was gently restrained by one of the older hunters, who held her arm. Her eyes were wide with terror and despair, imagining what Igor was facing inside, alone. The mother tigress also reacted to the sound, a low, guttural growl escaping her throat, and she rose, her front paws scratching the snow, the tension in her body almost palpable, ready to act at any moment. It was a moment of agonizing suspension, where the fate of all, humans and beasts, lay in the wise hands of a single blind man. Igor, oblivious to the external anguish, continued his journey, guided only by sounds and the urgency to save innocent lives. The connection between him and the cubs seemed to transcend the species barrier, a bond forged by despair and the purest compassion. He knew there was no time to lose, for the ice waited for no one. Igor, his heart pounding but his mind clear, extended his staff towards the crevice. The icy air emanating from it was denser, almost palpable, and the cub's whimpers, now so close, seemed to scratch at his soul. He felt the ice beneath his feet give way slightly, a sinister warning that the entire structure was on the verge of collapse. Each step was a silent prayer, a promise that he would not give up. He slid into the crevice, his body bent to pass through the narrow opening, and the outside world completely disappeared, replaced by an even deeper darkness and the deafening sound of ice breaking around him. Outside, Anya watched the crevice in the mountain with a sharp pain in her chest. The echo of the rumble still resonated in her ears, and the absence of any other sound from the cave was even more terrifying. She imagined Igor inside, alone, facing the cold, the darkness, and the imminence of death. Tears froze on her cheeks, but she could not look away. The other villagers, in sepulchral silence, shared her anguish. their prayers rising to ancestral spirits, asking for protection for the elder. The mother tigress, for her part, was now standing, her front paws firmly planted in the snow, her muscles tense. Her eyes, which had once expressed fury, were now pools of anxiety and an almost human fear fixed on the cave entrance. She let out a low growl, a lament that seemed a mixture of warning and plea. Inside the crevice, Igor was immersed in a labyrinth of ice. His wrinkled hands fumbled along the walls, feeling every protrusion, every indentation, every deepening fissure. The sound of the cubs was now a desperate chorus, so close he could almost feel their warm, frightened breath. He extended his staff and touched something soft and furry. A cub. His heart tightened with compassion. The small body trembled with cold and fear. He heard other whimpers, indicating there was more than one. The ice around him groaned and creaked like an old ship in a storm. Small fragments fell from the ceiling, tinkling like alarm bells. Igor knew there was no time for hesitation. He knelt with difficulty, the ice beneath his knees creaking menacingly. With slow and careful movements, he tried to reach the first cub, feeling the warmth of its soft fur and the tremor of its small body. The trembling melody of cracking ice now transformed into a constant roar, a warning that the cave was about to give way. He needed to be quick, but the fragility of the ice demanded delicacy. The lives of the cubs and the peace of his village depended on each of his movements. He felt the urgency of the situation, the responsibility weighing on his shoulders, but his determination was unwavering. A louder crack, a sound of deep rupture, made the entire cave tremble violently. The ground beneath Igor swayed, and he had to brace himself against the ice walls to avoid falling. More fragments tumbled down, some hitting his garments, but he did not care. The cub's whimpers intensified into a unison scream of terror. Igor knew time had run out. He stretched out his arms, fumbling desperately in the dark, searching for the small bodies. He needed to get them out now, before the ice mountains swallowed them forever. The crevice was closing, and the darkness seemed to tighten around him, but the vision of his heart was stronger than any shadow. He felt the fur of another cub and pulled it close, embracing it with utmost care as the ice around him began to collapse for good. Igor felt the ice collapse around him, a symphony of cracks and groans that seemed to swallow the world. He pressed the first cub against his chest, the small, furry body trembling with fear. His free hand fumbled frantically in the darkness, searching for the other. The whimpers mingled with the sound of the ice, and Igor knew there wasn't a second to lose. With a superhuman effort, he located the second cub, nestled in a small indentation. Carefully, he pulled it close, balancing the two small beings in his arms, feeling the warmth of their fragile lives against the relentless cold of the cave. The air filled with ice dust, and the damp, metallic smell of destruction was overwhelming. Outside, Anya watched with her heart in her throat. The entrance to the crevice where Igor had disappeared was now almost completely obscured by a cloud of snow and ice fragments flying through the air. A deafening roar, the final sound of the cave's collapse, reverberated across the tundra, making the ground tremble beneath her feet. She let out a cry of anguish, her hands clasped in prayer. It was the end, she thought. Igor, the wise elder, had sacrificed himself. The other villagers who had approached now wept in silence, hope crushed by nature's fury. The mother tigress, for her part, let out a roar of despair, a mixture of pain and rage that made the snow rise around her. She began to advance towards the cave entrance, her eyes wild as if to challenge the collapse itself. But then, amidst the dust and chaos, a silhouette emerged. Igor. He was hunched over, barely able to stand, but in his arms, pressed against his chest, were the two cubs. The elder staggered out of the crevice, his face covered in ice and snow, but a faint, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. He was exhausted, every muscle in his body screaming for rest, but the mission was accomplished. The melody of ice in his mind had silenced, replaced by the rapid heartbeats of the cubs and the gasping sound of his own breath. Anya ran towards him, tears now of relief streaming freely. She reached him, wrapping him in a tight embrace, ignoring the cold and snow. "Igor, you're alive. You did it." Her voice was choked, and she kissed the elder's wrinkled face, a gesture of gratitude and love. The villagers, who had previously wept, now erupted in exclamations of astonishment and admiration, rushing to surround the elder, their faces lit by renewed hope. The mother tigress stopped abruptly, her eyes fixed on Igor and the cubs in his arms. The roar of despair transformed into a low moan, almost a purr. She approached slowly, each step laden with instinctive caution, but also with an overwhelming need. Igor, sensing her presence, extended his arms, offering the cubs. He could not see her, but he felt the warmth of her massive body, the strong scent of her fur, and the vibration of her breath. It was a moment of pure trust, an invisible bond being forged between the species. With surprising delicacy for such a large predator, the mother tigress took the cubs, one at a time, with her mouth. She licked them tenderly, her eyes brimming with a deep emotion that transcended the animal barrier. She nestled them against her body, and a powerful, soft purr echoed across the tundra, a sound of gratitude and relief that calmed the entire horde. The nearly 1,000 tigers, once a threat, now watched in silence, their eyes reflecting an unexpected reverence. Peace had been achieved, not by force, but by the compassion of a blind man. Igor, standing, felt the warmth of the weak sun on his face and knew the village was safe. Winter was still merciless, but the seed of coexistence had been planted there. The immediate aftermath was a mixture of relief and profound awe. Anya helped Igor sit in the snow, her arms still wrapped tightly around him, as if fearing he might disappear again into the white immensity. The villagers, once paralyzed by fear, now approached cautiously, their faces marked by tears of joy and a deep reverence. They looked at Igor, then at the mother tigress and her cubs, and disbelief danced in their eyes. It was a miracle, something that defied all logic and experience of a life in the relentless tundra. The mother tigress, with her cubs safely nestled, did not move away. Instead, she lay down in the snow, a deep, continuous purr vibrating in her chest, a sound that for Igor was the most beautiful melody of gratitude. The other tigers of the horde, once a menacing mass, were now sitting or lying down, observing the scene with a quietness that was almost reverent. The icy air still bit, but the tension had dissipated, replaced by an atmosphere of strange and fragile peace. Igor, exhausted, felt Anya's warm hand on his face. "He is well, Anya," he whispered, his voice hoarse, but with a tone of deep satisfaction. "Peace has been planted." Anya nodded, but her eyes, as they fixed on the tiger horde, still carried a shadow of apprehension. The tiger's gratitude was palpable, yes, but the constant presence of nearly 1,000 predators so close to the village was something none of them had ever imagined. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple over the white vastness, the villagers slowly began to disperse, returning to their tents. The initial euphoria gave way to a more sober reflection. The village was saved, but what now? How did one live alongside a horde of tigers? The night brought not only more intense cold, but also a new layer of uncertainty. The next day, the weak sun barely managed to warm the air. Igor, though weakened, insisted on leaving his tent. Guided by Anya, he sat on a snow bench at the village entrance. The tiger horde was still there. They had not left. They were scattered across the plain, some sleeping, others observing the village with calm curiosity. The mother tigress, with her cubs, was closer, lying on a rise, her eyes fixed on Igor. The villagers, as they went about their daily tasks, felt the weight of that presence. Their movements were slower, their voices softer. Fear had not completely disappeared, it had merely transformed. It was no longer the dread of an imminent attack, but the anxiety of an unprecedented coexistence. How to hunt, how to gather firewood, how to live with 1,000 tiger eyes watching every step. Anya, sitting beside Igor, expressed the concern that hung in the air. "They haven't left, Elder. What will we do? We cannot live like this, in constant vigilance." Her voice was a whisper of despair. Igor remained silent for a long moment, his keen senses picking up the melody of the tundra, the whispers of the wind, and most importantly, the calm breathing of the tigers. He felt the apprehension of his people, the fear mingled with admiration. He turned his face towards Anya, a faint smile returning to his wrinkled lips. "They haven't left because the bond was forged, my daughter. They see us as part of their own family now, protectors of their cubs." He paused, and the sound of a tiger cub purring softly reached his ears. "This is our new challenge, Anya. Not to fight them, but to learn to live with them. True peace is not the absence of danger, but the presence of understanding." Anya looked at Igor, then at the tigers. The idea that those fierce predators considered them family was almost incomprehensible, but the stillness of the horde and the watchful gaze of the mother tigress seemed to corroborate the elder's words. It was an unexpected turning point. The village was not just saved, it was now intrinsically linked to a horde of 1,000 tigers. Igor's challenge did not end with the rescue. It was just beginning in a wholly new and profound way, demanding even greater wisdom to guide his people through this unprecedented coexistence. Winter, once the common enemy, now seemed a mere backdrop to the complexity and delicacy of this new relationship. The first rays of the following morning's sun, filtering through the tent openings, brought with them not the usual hope of a new day, but an almost palpable tension. The village awoke under the watchful gaze of 1,000 tiger eyes, a presence that, though no longer openly hostile, was overwhelming. Anya, stepping out of her tent, felt a shiver that didn't come solely from the cold. She saw the mother tigress, still lying on the rise, her cubs playing cautiously near her. Her eyes met Anya's for a brief moment, and the young woman felt a whirlwind of emotions, fear, admiration, and a strange sense of responsibility. It was as if nature had handed them a burden, a test of their capacity for compassion. Igor, sitting on his snow bench, listened to the sounds of the village. The footsteps were more hesitant, the conversations softer. He felt the apprehension of his people like a heavy veil over the tundra. A young hunter, Boris, approached, his face furrowed with concern. "Elder Igor," he began, his voice a whisper, "how will we hunt? How will we take our herds to graze? They are everywhere. Our guard dogs are restless, barking softly all night long." Igor inclined his head, listening not only to the words, but to the tremor in Boris's voice, the genuine fear they carried. He extended a wrinkled hand, touching the young man's shoulder. "Patience, my son, is the first lesson the tundra teaches us, and understanding the second." Anya observed the interaction, feeling the weight of Boris's words. Life in Yakutia was already a daily struggle for survival. Adding the complexity of coexisting with a horde of predators was something that challenged the very essence of their existence. She saw the mother tigress raise her head, her eyes fixed on Igor. There was no threat, only a watchful observation. It was as if she too was waiting, assessing the next move. The elder, with his blindness, seemed to be the only one to see beyond the surface, to feel the promise of a different future. In the days that followed, the village settled into a strange rhythm. Hunters went out in larger groups, their bows and spears ready, but their hearts heavy with uncertainty. The tigers, for their part, maintained a respectful distance, but their presence was constant. They watched the villagers, and the villagers watched them. Small gestures of approach began to emerge. One day, a tiger cub, more curious than the others, approached a child playing in the snow. The mother tigress growled softly, not in threat, but in warning. The child, startled, ran to its mother. Igor, hearing the incident, called the child and its mother. "Do not fear, little one. They are learning just as we are. Fear is a wall that prevents us from seeing the bridge." He explained that trust is not built overnight, but with small acts of respect and patience. The villagers, though still apprehensive, began to follow his guidance. They left small offerings of reindeer meat for the tigers, not as sacrifice, but as a gesture of goodwill, a recognition of the bond that united them. The mother tigress accepted the offerings, her eyes fixed on the humans, and a low, deep purr was the only response. Igor felt the change in the air, a gradual decrease in tension. The human connection, now extended to these majestic predators, was beginning to flourish, a testament to the elders' wisdom and altruism. The village was learning to dance with winter and with its new neighbors, in a melody of coexistence that defied all expectations. The melody of coexistence, though challenging, slowly began to find its rhythm. Days turned into weeks, and the presence of the tigers became a strange yet undeniable part of the village landscape. Igor, sitting on his snow bench, continued to be the beacon of wisdom, his ears and heart open to the concerns of his people. He felt the tension diminish, but also the persistence of a latent fear, a shadow that refused to completely disappear. Anya, for her part, observed the horde with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. She saw the mother tigress, now more relaxed, allowing her cubs to explore a little more, though always under her watchful eye. One day, as Anya gathered firewood at the edge of the frozen forest, she noticed one of the tiger cubs following her at a safe distance. Its curious, innocent eyes watched her, and Anya, with a gentle smile, dropped a piece of dried meat she had in her pocket. The cub hesitated, sniffed the air, and then, with a quick movement, took the offering and ran back to its mother. It was a small gesture, but for Anya it meant a lot. Boris, the young hunter, still struggled with the new reality. He deeply respected Igor, but a hunter's logic, forged in years of caution and survival, screamed against the idea of trusting predators. "Elder," he said to Igor one morning, his voice laden with doubt, "what if they change their minds? What if hunger is greater than gratitude? Our herds are lean, and winter shows no mercy." Igor touched Boris's face, feeling the concern etched into his features. "Hunger is a challenge for all of us, my son, but gratitude, when true, is food for the soul that lasts longer than any meat. We must show them that we are worthy of this gratitude, and they will show us the same." Igor's wisdom was a balm, but the practice was arduous. The villagers began to adapt their routines. Hunts were longer, requiring them to venture further to avoid tiger territories. But, strangely, the tigers seemed to guide themselves by human movements, maintaining a distance that allowed both to survive. It was a delicate dance, where each species learned to respect the other's space. The mother tigress, in particular, seemed to have developed a special bond with Igor. She often lay on a snowdrift near the village, her eyes fixed on the elder's tent. Igor, though blind, felt her presence, a kind of invisible warmth emanating from her. He knew that trust was not a one-way street. He had trusted her by delivering her cubs, and she, in turn, was now trusting his village to maintain peace. Anya, observing this silent interaction, began to understand the depth of Igor's words. It wasn't just about surviving, but about evolving. The village, once isolated in its struggle against nature, was now opening up to a new form of existence, one that demanded more than just physical strength. It demanded a strength of spirit, an ability to see beyond differences and find humanity, or tigerness, in the other. The village children, with their natural innocence, were the first to embrace this new reality without reservation. They watched the tiger cubs playing in the distance, imitating their movements, their laughter echoing across the tundra. Igor heard these laughs, and a genuine smile formed on his wrinkled lips. He knew that the future of the village lay in these new generations, who would learn to live in harmony with nature and its inhabitants, breaking down the barriers of fear and building bridges of understanding. Yakutia, with its relentless challenges, was witnessing the blossoming of a hope no one would dare to dream of. The laughter of the children, echoing across the white vastness, was the sweetest melody Igor had heard in a long time. It was a sound of hope, of an innocence not yet corrupted by fear or distrust. He felt the lightness in the air, a subtle shift in the village's atmosphere. The little ones, with their innate curiosity, were the ambassadors of the new era, watching the tiger cubs playing in the distance, imitating their agile movements and soft growls. Igor smiled, a smile that reached his blind eyes, illuminating his wrinkled face. Anya, sitting beside the elder, watched her own children, who once fearful, now pointed at the tiger cubs with contained excitement. She still carried a hint of apprehension, a remnant of the old order, but the children's joy was contagious. "They don't carry the weight of memory, Elder," she murmured, her voice soft as falling snow. "For them, this is the only reality they know." Igor nodded slowly. "They teach us, Anya, to see the world with new eyes, without the veils of the past. True vision is not what the eyes see, but what the heart feels." He extended his hand and touched hers, a gesture of comfort and wisdom. Boris, however, still couldn't shake off his concerns. He approached, his steps heavy, his face etched with worry. "Elder, the hunts are becoming more difficult. We need to go further, and winter is tightening its grip. Our reindeer herds are dwindling, and hunger is a threat we cannot ignore, even with peace." His voice was a lament, the harsh reality of survival in Yakutia knocking at the door. Igor listened attentively, sensing the truth in the young hunter's words. Coexistence was a gift, but also an immense responsibility. He knew that the tiger's gratitude would not fill his people's stomachs. "Wisdom tells us that nature always offers a path, Boris. We need to learn to read its signs in a new way. Perhaps traditional hunting is not the only answer." He paused, his keen ears picking up the distant sound of an elk herd, a sound that was once rare in that region. The mother tigress, as if sensing the tension, rose from her rise. She walked slowly towards the village, stopping at a respectful distance, her amber eyes fixed on Igor. There was no threat in her gaze, but a deep intelligence, almost an understanding. She let out a low purr, a sound Igor interpreted as an acknowledgement, perhaps even an offer. He turned his face towards the tigress, a gentle smile curving his lips. "She shows us the way, Boris. Tigers are natural hunters. They know the best grounds, the most abundant herds. If we can learn to coexist, perhaps we can learn to hunt in a new way, respecting their territories and sharing the resources the tundra offers." The idea seemed absurd to Boris, but the tigress's stillness and Igor's confidence were undeniable. Anya, observing the scene, felt a flicker of hope. The mother tigress, as if to reinforce the elder's words, turned and began to walk slowly in a specific direction, occasionally pausing to look back, as if inviting them to follow her. Igor felt the change in the air, the vibration of the earth beneath his feet. "She guides us," he whispered, a glint in his eyes. "She shows us that true justice is not just about surviving, but about prospering together." The villagers, though hesitant, began to move, following the majestic tigress, guided by faith in their elder and the promise of a new way of life where predator and prey could find a delicate balance, forged by compassion and mutual need. Yakutia, with its relentless challenges, was about to witness a silent revolution, a dance of survival and respect that would redefine the relationship between humans and beasts. The villagers, still clutching their hunting tools, followed the majestic tigress. Their steps were hesitant, their eyes darting between the powerful feline ahead and the vast expanse of snow around them. The air was thick with a mixture of apprehension and a growing sense of awe. Boris, the young hunter, walked at the forefront, his spear firmly gripped, but his tense shoulders revealed the internal battle between a predator's logic and blind faith in Igor. He looked at the tigress, at the way she moved with silent grace, and at Igor, who, though blind, seemed to see further than any of them. The elder walked with unwavering serenity, his hand lightly resting on Anya's arm, who guided him. His ears caught every whisper of the wind, every crunch of snow beneath the tiger's paws, every heartbeat of the villagers. He felt his people's hesitation, but also an undercurrent of hope that was beginning to flow. The tigress led them along a path the villagers rarely traversed, through a narrow passage between ice-covered rock formations, and then across a vast, untouched plain. The silence was profound, broken only by the wind and the crunch of footsteps in the snow. The tigress's cubs, who had previously played near their mother, now followed closely, their small bodies moving with the same instinctive caution. Anya observed the interaction, noting how the other tigers of the horde, who followed at an even greater distance, maintained a formation that seemed to protect the humans' flanks. It was not an escort, but an ordered coexistence, a dance choreographed by necessity and respect. After hours of walking, under a sun that barely warmed the skin, the tigress stopped. She turned her head, her amber eyes fixed on Igor, and let out a low purr, a sound that vibrated in the elder's chest. Igor felt the change in the air, the intensifying scent of wildlife, the distant sound of hooves striking the snow. "We are close," he whispered to Anya, a smile spreading across his face. "I feel their presence." The tigress then moved to a rise, indicating with her head a vast basin below. And there they were, a herd of elk, perhaps 200 or 300 grazing peacefully in the snow, completely oblivious to the presence of humans and tigers. It was a breathtaking sight, an abundance the village hadn't seen in many winters. Boris, upon seeing the herd, felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. His eyes widened, and the tension in his shoulders finally eased. "Elk! So many!" he exclaimed, his voice choked. "But how did she know?" Igor smiled. "Nature has its secrets, my son, and the tigress, like us, is part of it." The mother tigress then did something even more surprising. She lay down in the snow, observing the herd, but without making any move to hunt. The other tigers of the horde also positioned themselves, creating a semicircle that somehow seemed to direct the herd towards a specific area, more accessible to human hunters. It was a silent offering, an unexpected collaboration. The villagers, led by Boris, understood the signal. With renewed energy, they prepared for the hunt, but this time, with a renewed respect for the land and their new guides. The hunt was successful, the most bountiful the village had experienced in years. The tigers watched, and when the humans had taken enough for their needs, the mother tigress rose and with a soft roar indicated it was her horde's turn. The sharing was silent, a pact of respect and mutual need. Igor, sitting on a rock, felt the warmth of the sun on his face and the smell of fresh meat. Hunger would no longer be an immediate threat. True justice, he realized, was not about domination, but about finding balance, the delicate dance between all forms of life in Yakutia. The village had found a new path, guided by the wisdom of a blind elder and the unexpected compassion of 1,000 tigers. The silent revolution had taken its first and most significant step. The warmth of the bountiful hunt filled their stomachs, but did not completely dissipate the cold that was announcing itself. The silent revolution had taken its first and most significant step. But Yakutia, relentless in its majesty, would not allow the newfound peace to settle without a new test. The days following the abundant hunt brought welcome relief, but Igor felt a growing unease in the air, an icy whisper that went beyond the usual wind. His keen senses picked up a change in the earth's vibration, an oppressive silence that preceded something grand and fearsome. He felt the tundra's breath growing heavier, the ice denser, the air more biting. Anya, busy with preparing hides and storing meat, noticed the concern on the elder's wrinkled face. "Elder, the hunt was a success. Our stores are full. Why this shadow in your eyes?" Igor turned to her, his blind eyes fixed on a distant point only he could see. "Winter has many faces, my daughter, and this one approaching is the cruelest. I feel Mother Nature's fury accumulating, a storm that will make what we've seen before seem like a mere breath." Boris, approaching with a bundle of firewood, stopped upon hearing Igor's words. He had learned to trust the elder's wisdom, but his hunter's heart still tightened at Yakutia's unpredictability. That night, Igor's prediction manifested with terrifying brutality. A howling wind, unlike anything experienced before, descended upon the village, bringing with it a blizzard so dense that visibility was reduced to almost nothing. The temperature plummeted to unthinkable levels, and the tents, though robust, began to groan under the pressure of ice and wind. The villagers huddled together, fear returning to their eyes. Outside, the tiger horde also struggled. Their roars, once of fury, were now of despair against the biting cold. Igor felt the animals' panic, the threat of freezing that hung over everyone. The mother tigress, with her cubs, approached the village, her amber eyes visible through the curtain of snow, seeking something, perhaps shelter, perhaps an answer. She let out a low growl, a sound Igor understood as a plea for help, an acknowledgement of shared vulnerability. "Our tents will not withstand this fury for long," Igor declared, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Nor will the tigers survive exposed. There is a place, an ancient cave, hidden deep within White Raven Mountain. It is large enough for all of us, humans and beasts. But the path is treacherous, and time is scarce." Boris looked at the elder, then at the blizzard. The idea of sharing a shelter with 1,000 tigers was insane, but the alternative was certain death. Anya, her heart heavy, touched Igor's hand. "Elder, how will we get there? And how will the tigers follow us into a cave?" Igor smiled, a smile that conveyed unwavering faith. "They will follow us because trust was forged in the fire of necessity, and we will guide them with heart and courage. This is the final test of our coexistence, the climax of our journey. It is not just about surviving, but about choosing life together." The mother tigress, as if understanding every word, let out a soft roar, a call that seemed to echo Igor's determination. Yakutia, in its fury, had imposed the supreme challenge, and the village, with its new allies, was about to face it, uniting in a desperate dance for survival. Where the clearest vision belonged to the heart, Yakutia, in its fury, had imposed the supreme challenge, and the village, with its new allies, was about to face it, uniting in a desperate dance for survival, where the clearest vision belonged to the heart. Igor, his hand firm on Anya's arm, felt the wind whip his face, but his determination was a shield against the cold. Advance, my children, one step at a time. Listen to the ice. Feel the earth beneath your feet. He guided not only with words, but with the vibration of his soul. Boris, apprehensive, was at the front, clearing a path with his spear to test the deep snow. He looked at the mother tigress, who followed closely with her cubs, her amber eyes gleaming in the blizzard, a silent and powerful presence. The journey to White Raven Mountain was a battle against nature. The wind howled like 1,000 hungry wolves, and the snow, fine and biting, penetrated their clothes. The children, wrapped in furs, were carried, their whimpers muffled by the storm. Igor, however, seemed to find a rhythm, his keen ears mapping the terrain, detecting hidden fissures in the ice, elevations and depressions. "To the right, Boris! There's a crevice there," he warned, and the young hunter obeyed without question, his trust in the elder overcoming his instinct for caution. The tiger horde, surprisingly, remained united, their massive bodies forming a barrier against the wind for the smaller ones, and their low roars were a constant echo of their struggle. The mother tigress, in particular, seemed to be in tune with Igor. She stopped when he stopped, waited when she sensed danger, and her eyes fixed on the elder as if he were her guide. Anya, observing this silent choreography, felt a wave of emotion. They were no longer just predators and prey. They were companions in destiny, united by the same threat. After what seemed like endless hours, the silhouette of White Raven Mountain emerged from the blizzard, a dark and imposing mass. Igor raised his head. "The cave is near. I feel the echo of emptiness, the smell of cold stone." He led them through a narrow crevice, where the wind was less fierce. The cave entrance was a dark mouth in the mountain, protected by an overhang. The villagers hesitated, the fear of the unknown and the proximity of the tigers still present. The mother tigress, sensing their hesitation, advanced. She growled softly, a sound Igor interpreted as an invitation, an assurance. She entered first, her cubs following closely, and the other tigers, one by one, began to enter the darkness. Boris, seeing the tigress's courage, felt his fear diminish. "Let's go, Elder. They are waiting for us." He helped Igor enter, and soon the entire village, with their belongings, was inside the cave. The interior was vast and cold, but it offered refuge from the biting wind. The tigers settled on one side, their eyes gleaming in the dark, while the villagers huddled on the other, lighting small fires with firewood. Warmth began to spread, and the sound of the wind howling outside seemed distant. Igor sat down, feeling the warmth on his face. He heard the sighs of relief from his people, the purrs of the tigers, and the soft cry of a child finding peace. The conflict of immediate survival was resolved. They had arrived. Yakutia had tested their faith, and they had responded with courage and compassion, forging a new chapter in their history, where true vision was unity and hope. Inside the cave, the storm's howl seemed a distant lament, a memory fading before the warmth of the fires and the comforting presence of so many living beings. The air, once thick with panic, now carried the smell of smoke and silent relief. The villagers, exhausted, huddled near the fire, their eyes still reflecting the terror of the journey, but also a new light of hope. On the other side, the tigers slept, their massive bodies forming a warm wall, their low purrs filling the space like an ancestral lullaby. Igor felt all of this, the warmth spreading through his body, the smell of wet furs and damp earth, the sound of the rhythmic breathing of his people and the great felines. He knew they had reached a new level of existence. Anya, sitting beside him, held his hand, and Igor felt the lightness in her touch, the absence of the tension that had accompanied her for so long. "We are safe, Elder," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thanks to you." Igor smiled, a serene smile that illuminated his wrinkled face. "No, my daughter. Thanks to all of us, to Boris's courage, to our people's faith, and to the wisdom of the mother tigress. She showed us that strength lies not only in teeth and claws, but in the heart that chooses life. Boris, who watched the tiger cubs sleeping nestled with their parents, felt a lump in his throat. The image of the 1,000 predators, once terrifying, was now one of protectors, of allies. He approached Igor, his eyes fixed on the elder. I doubted, Elder. I doubted this was possible, but now I see. There is no more fear, only respect. The mother tigress, as if sensing Boris's words, opened her amber eyes. She rose slowly, walked to Igor, and rubbed her head against his shoulder, a gesture of profound trust and gratitude. Igor extended his hand and stroked her soft fur, feeling the warmth and life pulsating beneath his fingers. It was a moment of pure connection, a bond forged in adversity and sealed by compassion. The days that followed inside the cave were days of healing and silent learning. The children, with their innocence, were the first to approach the tiger cubs, observing them from afar, imitating their movements, and soon the small felines responded with curiosity, breaking down the last barriers of fear. Coexistence in the cave became living proof that peace was possible, even between such distinct species. When the storm finally subsided, revealing an immaculate blue sky and a landscape of freshly washed snow, villagers and tigers emerged from the cave. Yakutia's sun, though weak, seemed to bless the new alliance. The tiger horde did not disperse. Instead, they remained close, a majestic and vigilant presence. The mother tigress, with her cubs beside her, looked at Igor, and the elder felt a call, a promise of a shared future. Igor's village now was not just a settlement in the icy vastness. It was a beacon of hope, a testament that true vision is not limited to what the eyes can see, but resides in the heart's ability to transcend fear and embrace compassion. Yakutia, with its relentless challenges, had taught them the most valuable lesson: that survival is not just about individual strength, but about unity, altruism, and the unbreakable connection that can emerge even in the most extreme circumstances, forging a legacy of peace that would echo for generations. The legacy of peace that would echo for generations began to manifest in subtle yet profound ways in the days and winters that followed. Igor's village, once an isolated dot in the white immensity, became a living example of a new era, a beacon of hope in the icy vastness. The presence of the tigers was no longer a latent threat, but a promise of the future. They did not leave. They remained in the surroundings, a silent and majestic guard, their amber eyes watching, protecting, and at times guiding the tribe's paths. Igor, though age advanced, they kept the flame of his wisdom burning brighter than ever. He spent his days teaching the children not only the skills of survival in the tundra, but the art of listening to the wind, of feeling the earth's vibrations, of understanding the world beyond what the eyes could see. He spoke of the mother tigress as a soul sister, of the cubs as nephews, weaving stories that transformed fear into respect and admiration. The children, without the burden of their elders' prejudices, played happily near the village limits, where the tiger cubs, now grown and imposing, occasionally appeared, curious but never threatening, establishing a connection. Anya, who had become a respected and visionary leader, worked tirelessly to strengthen these unbreakable bonds. She organized the hunts, now more efficient and safer, as the tigers, with their innate knowledge of wildlife movements, often directed herds of elk and reindeer to the most accessible areas, without demanding more than their fair share. It was a complex, yet perfectly harmonious dance of give and take, where abundance was shared with gratitude and scarcity was faced together with resilience. Boris, the young hunter once skeptical and fearful, transformed into the greatest advocate and ambassador of coexistence. His eyes, once filled with apprehension and distrust, now shone with a deep understanding and reverence for nature. He led the young people on expeditions that were not just about hunting, but about observation, about learning from the great felines. He recounted how, on one memorable occasion, a hungry polar bear approached the village, and it was the tiger horde that, with a powerful unison roar, chased it away, without a human needing to raise a spear. Gratitude was a palpable feeling, a bond that united the two species. Winters continued to be relentless, with temperatures that challenged life itself and tested endurance. But the village was stronger than ever. The tents were more robust, provisions more plentiful, and the people's spirit unwavering. The connection with the tigers had taught humans the importance of unity, collective resilience, and interdependence. They had learned to read nature's signs with new depth, to anticipate the fiercest storms, to find refuge in the earth's crevices. Igor, in his final years, sat at the edge of the village, his wrinkled face turned towards Yakutia's weak sun, his keen ears catching the symphony of life, the distant sound of tiger roars, the children's laughter, the soft murmur of streams thawing in spring. All were music to his soul. He had seen, with the eyes of his heart, a future where peace was a tangible reality, where respect transcended species barriers, forging a new chapter in Yakutia's history. He proved that true strength lies not in domination, but in compassion, that wisdom is not just knowledge, but the ability to love and protect. Igor's village flourished, a sanctuary of coexistence, an eternal legacy of a blind elder who taught the world to see with its heart.